Hey guys, it's Michelle here. Welcome back to Alive and Well. I want to talk about boundaries today. It's one of our core steps inside of my signature group program, Burnout Recovery Blueprint, because boundaries, let me start here. So often when we find ourselves in a season where we are feeling or experiencing burnout, it's because we have not been clear with what are our core values, right? Our priorities, and then being intentional about aligning our life and our day-to-day and our calendar with those core values, with protecting and prioritizing those core values. And when we're living out of alignment with that, we often experience burnout. So many of the women that I work with, we do work around our core values, right? And I'll say, I have a whole process, but we start with identifying your 5 core values, and they'll have a core value. Let's say, for example, that's being present with their family, right? And then I'm like, okay, open your calendar for the last 2 weeks, and let's go through it and show me the ways in which you protected intentional time to be present with your family. And so often it's really humbling to do that. Same for me, right? Because without the intention, we just kind of get stuck in this like day-to-day routine. And the things that we say are really important to us aren't actually protected in our calendar. They're not actually happening. And that doesn't feel good. There's a dissonance there. And so often that can lead to burnout. And in order to protect those core values or the things that we say that are actually important to us, what do we need? We need boundaries. We need boundaries. So I think that's why this conversation today is going to be so helpful, because it's going to be kind of that starting point. If you're someone who's ever set a boundary, and then you find yourself a couple days later, or maybe a couple hours later, right? You set a boundary with your kids or something, and it's like a couple hours, you're like, forget it. I can't even do this. Fine. Just go for it. Right? This episode is for you. So today we're going to kind of unpack why that happens. Of course, we're going to talk about the nervous system. It plays a role. Surprise, surprise. And then I want to give you guys some really practical handles on what to do instead, so you can really start setting boundaries that protect the things that you say are important to you that actually stick, right? So if you've ever been feeling like, I know what I should be doing, right? I get the concept of setting boundaries. I understand why they're important, but why do I always cave, right? Why don't I follow through? Why do I violate my own boundaries? First of all, you're not alone, right? It's not because you're flaky or weak or lack discipline or what have you. It's a nervous system issue. Boundaries that don't hold, you guys, aren't like, they really have little to do with willpower. It's so much more about a lack of regulation. So when someone pushes back on a boundary you set, let's say you set a boundary with your boss at work, right? Or maybe it's even with a client, and you block off part of your calendar, or you set a boundary, I'm not going to be available by phone or email after 5 p.m. or, what have you. And then you kind of get this cold shoulder response, or they keep reaching out to you after, and then you keep responding. Or, maybe it's something else altogether. You get invited to something and you decline the invitation, and you kind of feel this tension in the relationship. Your nervous system picks up on all of that, and your nervous system perceives it as a threat. Your body's not actually under any physical threat, right? But your nervous system doesn't know that. It doesn't know that. And because safety is your body's number one priority, bam, sends you into stress response, fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. And in that dysregulated state, when you're in one of those stress responses, your capacity to set and hold boundaries, gone, disappeared, offline, because it feels physically uncomfortable. It feels even unsafe to your nervous system to stick with and follow through on what you said. So what do? Right? We've all done this. You just abandon the boundary because you would rather restore that external peace and then kind of make yourself feel better, right? Like, okay, I violated a boundary. That doesn't feel great. But the short-term kind of like soothing of that internal discomfort of setting a boundary and potentially inconveniencing or disappointing someone else, that feels better, right? In the short term. So if you've been beating yourself up for like not being strong enough, I do want you to hear this. It's really not a strength problem. It's actually a safety problem. And more specifically, safety in your body, in your nervous system problem. Your nervous system needs to feel safe in order to set and hold a boundary. Like that's it, full stop. And most of us have never learned that, right? Especially if you grew up in environments where boundaries either weren't modeled, they weren't set, they certainly weren't respected. It's hard. It's hard to carry this out now if we weren't taught these things. But here's the truth is that boundaries are how we protect those core values. Boundaries is how we protect the highest version of ourselves. Boundaries is how we protect where we're going. Like when you see yourself at your best, she is protected in this beautiful boundary bubble. And without our boundaries, we just leave ourselves open to our old patterns and our old coping mechanisms and all of the like low-hanging fruit that is put out there that pulls us out of alignment. And every time we abandon a boundary, every time we cross that line, every time we do the things that we said we weren't going to do, or we don't do the things that we said we were going to do that we know are good for us and make us feel better. Every time we make a choice like that, so often it's unconsciously, right? Every time we make a choice that moves us further from the version of ourselves that we most want to be and show up as, we're abandoning a boundary. Boundaries aren't punishment, guys. They're protection. And without intentional boundaries, we leave ourselves open to all the low-hanging fruit that's going to comfort us in the moment, right? The short-term, lower impulsive self. So to live out our highest potential and stay in alignment with who we want to be and how we want to show up, we really have to do the work to like clarify where we draw the line. Okay. So that's like reason number one, I think. Reason number two is that we tend to set boundaries reactively instead of proactively, right? It's like we've just had enough. I mean, raise your hand if this sounds familiar. It's like you're totally fried. It's the end of the day. You've like been making decisions and solving problems and dealing with people all day long. You have overextended yourself. And then you're exhausted at the end of the day. And then this moment of just like frustration, you're like, fine, that's it. I am not working past 5 p.m. anymore. Right. And it sounds empowering at the moment, like whatever the boundary is that you pull when you're so just like at the end of your rope. It sounds empowering in the morning and in the moment. It feels empowering in the moment, but it's actually a reaction. And it's a reaction to the dysregulation that's happening in your body. It's not actually a boundary that's rooted in a regulated nervous system. So then what happens, right? You set this boundary as a reaction because you're frustrated. And then Monday comes around or tomorrow comes around and you're back in it, right? Whether it's like, let's say it was that work boundary and you're like, no, I can't do this anymore. Like I have to get home at a certain time so I can make dinner and do the after school stuff and get the laundry going and get my kids to bed. Like I can't stay at the office till 7 p.m. anymore. And you make that boundary and it's Friday and you're just fried and you're like, I'm not doing this anymore. It's not working. And then Monday comes and you're back at it. Your inbox is exploding and someone's asking for a last minute meeting and you feel guilty and you cave. And then the cycle continues. Instead of setting boundaries from that place of frustration and exhaustion and resentment, we need to put some space there. And we need to set them from a resourced state. When you are calm, when you are clear on your needs, when you've thought about what it's actually going to take to support that boundary and come up, right, with the systems or the tools or the resources or the help or what have you when things get hard. Because when we're just making reactive boundaries, we haven't thought it through, right? So they're like dramatic or they're rigid or they're unsustainable. But when we flip that and we put some space there and we really plan this out, regulated boundaries are thoughtful and they're firm and they have a plan in place and they probably have a backup plan in place and they're realistic. We also have to understand that most of us just weren't taught how to create clear boundaries in the first place. I think so often our culture confuses boundaries with either rules or ultimatums, or we create these kind of mental, like just like a mental stop sign that we try to rely on. But those only work when we're really well resourced, right? When everything's going well. When we're frustrated or tired or dysregulated, it's just so much easier to default back to what's familiar. And that's why part of your boundary work is just getting really clear on who you actually want to be, right? What's the version of you that's already in there, that's already inside? And then protecting that, right? Drawing these boundary lines around her. And this highest self, this version of you, right, at her best, it's not something you have to go out and create. She already exists. She's already there. We just haven't protected her very well. And that's where our boundaries really come in. Okay, so let's kind of jump into the meat of this. I want to talk about what's actually going to help make your boundaries stick. So here are a few things that I want you guys to keep in mind. First, just talking about it, a regulated boundary is planned and practiced, right? It's not something that we're just like shouting out of frustration at the end of a long day. It's not this like heat of the moment reaction. It's not like, wow, you've asked me for a popsicle 47 times and I feel like my head's going to explode. Fine, just have a popsicle, but we're not going to have one tomorrow or for the rest of the week. It's not that kind of reactive boundary. It's something that we think about and we regulate before we set it. And we prepare our nervous system for what the potential response might be to us setting that boundary, right? We're going to set boundaries. The people who have been abusing our lack of boundaries, frankly, are going to be the ones who are probably going to push back the hardest, right? They have the most to lose by us setting this boundary. So how can we prepare our nervous systems and our body for that potential pushback, right? If we get a comment about it, if we get the eye roll, if we get the sigh, if we get the critic, like whatever it is, can we be ready to handle that without that causing further dysregulation? So that's the first thing. A regulated boundary is planned and practiced. Second, a micro boundary is also super powerful. You guys know all the time, I'm like, you don't have to overhaul this whole thing overnight, right? You don't have to overhaul and set all of these really strict boundaries. Start with a micro boundary. Start with something really small. You can't overhaul everything overnight. You're setting yourself up to fail. It's not going to work. It's going to make you feel more dysregulated and overwhelmed. And then it's really like, it's not motivating when we start setting all these big things and then we can't actually carry them out, right? That's discouraging. Instead, try a micro boundary. Instead of what we're talking about with like, that's it, I'm leaving the office at 5:00 every day. I'm not working after 5:00 anymore. How about a micro boundary around that? I'm going to log off by 5:30 once this week. And I'm going to see how that feels, right? Starting small like that just really helps our body adjust. And then we do it and then we can evaluate, right? Was that practical? Did that actually work? How did it feel, right? What happened when I got home earlier? And then we can add on to that if we want to. But starting with a micro boundary can be really powerful. The third thing that I think is going to help, and this kind of relates back to number one, is that we have to prepare ourselves. We have to expect discomfort. Discomfort in expressing the boundary, discomfort in holding and enforcing the boundary, and discomfort doesn't mean that you're doing it wrong. Discomfort usually means you're probably doing it right. The key is learning how to stay with that discomfort without abandoning yourself, right? Without violating the boundary, without going back to your old ways. Discomfort probably means that you're doing it right. So expect it, right? And tell yourself, I can be uncomfortable and still be safe, right? I can be uncomfortable, and this is actually part of me growing. I can be uncomfortable while setting something that big picture is actually going to bring me a lot more peace in the long term. Expect the discomfort, and your body will come to trust that you are resourced enough and mature enough and have the tools enough to handle that discomfort, to handle what comes in response to you setting a boundary to protect the things that are really important to you. And then fourth, Build repair into your process, you guys. What happens when you collapse on a boundary? Because I don't think that's an if, I think that's a when, right? Life is going to keep on lifing. Stuff just keeps coming at us, right? We have to pivot. We can't set a boundary that we're going to stop work at 5 p.m. every single day and then expect that that's actually going to happen. There's going to be days where project gets dropped on your desk right at the end of the day, right? Or someone walks into your office and has to have a conversation about something, or, a deadline changes or a client calls or like what have you. You're going to breach a boundary at some point. It happens. But instead of spiraling into this like shame and discouragement spiral, can we ask ourselves, like, what did I actually need in that moment that I didn't have? I think that's a really powerful question when we break a boundary. What did I need in that moment when the boundary was breached that I didn't have, right? What would help me hold it better next time? And that's the repair process, right? When a boundary is breached, ask yourself, man, what did I need in that moment that I didn't have? Maybe I should have had a conversation to set my work end time earlier, right? Maybe when someone walked in 15 minutes before, or client called 15 minutes before I'm supposed to stop working for the day, I'd be like, hey, I'm happy to help you through this, but just so we're on the same page here, I have a hard stop in 15 minutes. So let's get as much done as we can. We'll pause and we'll pick this up tomorrow, right? That would have helped me hold my boundary. And then that's the learning process. And that's the repair. And that's where trust is rebuilt with ourselves. And then I think finally, one of the things that really helps us make our boundaries stick is this understanding and belief that boundaries actually create freedom. Because when you protect your bandwidth, when you protect your attention, when you protect your behavior, when you protect your needs, your inner child's needs, and those are the 4 areas of boundaries that I teach on inside of Burnout Recovery Blueprint. We need boundaries around our bandwidth, attention, behavior, and our inner child needs. When we understand that boundaries actually protect those things, y'all, we're not limiting our life. We're creating so much space to actually live in alignment with a version of us that already exists. Because otherwise, without any boundaries, that highest version of you, that best version of you, is constantly being infiltrated by all the noise of the world. And without boundaries, we don't have clarity and we don't have protection around who we are and what we value and what we stand for. So I think those are just good things to keep in mind and know and try when it comes to boundaries. And I want to give you guys this framework that I actually use inside of Burnout Recovery Blueprint. When you're at that point that you're like, okay, do I actually follow through on the boundary or do I breach it? Let's say you've set a boundary that you're going to move your body in the morning when you wake up before your day starts, right? You're going to go for a walk, or you're going to do some stretching or some Pilates, or you're going to go to the gym, what have you. So you set this boundary for yourself. I'm going to take care of my body in the morning. I'm going to move my body in the morning, 3 days a week, 4 days a week before I start my day. Because I know that when I do that, the impact on the rest of my day, undeniable, right? I have more energy. I feel less stressed. I feel less anxious. I'm more present with my family. I'm more productive at work. I'm more creative. I'm more focused, what have you. So you set this boundary with yourself. And then you wake up in the morning, right? And you have time and you feel rested and all these things, but there's that tension. There's that point where you have to decide, am I following through with a boundary that I set for myself that I am going to move my body this morning? Or am I going to stay in bed and keep hitting snooze, right? That's the point. That's the choice point. When you realize that you are at the choice point, maybe you're tempted to break the boundary and take the easy way. I want you to try my beat framework. Take a beat, okay? Let that come up when you're at that choice point. Okay, I'm going to take a beat. And it's an acronym, BEAT. B stands for body. So in that moment, let's say you're laying in bed okay, I told myself I was going to work out this morning. I set this boundary, whatever it is. In your mind, imagine that you're crossing the boundary. So imagine that you're not going to work out and you're going to lay in bed for another 15 minutes or so. And then it's going to be too late to start your workout, right? You're making that decision to cross your boundary. I'm not going to work out. I'm going to hit snooze. I'm going to stay in bed for another 15 minutes. Notice how your body feels about that decision, right? You're not actually deciding. You're just like mentally, if I were to decide this, how does it feel in my body? Because what I know is that when I do that and I make the decision to cross the boundary, immediately I get like a pit in my stomach and my shoulders kind of cave in and my chest kind of feels heavy. And it's just like a ugh kind of feeling, right? Notice that. So that's B. The second is E for effect. After you've noticed how making the decision of breaking the boundary feels in your body, think about the effect of breaking that boundary. How's this decision going to impact your life? How's this decision to break the boundary going to impact your day, right? How is skipping your workout and staying in bed going to impact your kids, those you care about most, right? And just think about it. This whole thing should take you, 20 seconds, but just like let yourself reflect on how the decision to break the boundary is going to impact your life and those you care about most. Effect. And then A, alignment. Is this aligned? This choice you're about to make, is it aligned with your highest self? That version of you that is just running on all cylinders, that feels so good, so energized, so grounded, so present. Is this decision aligned with that version of you? Because if it's not, what does that bring up, right? If you're going to stay in bed and hit snooze and not get the workout in, is that decision aligned with your highest self, or is it aligned with your old self, driven by, comfort or fear or what have you? And then finally for the T, thank. Right? And this one's super easy, but just imagine like, hey, I'm so tempted to not follow through on my boundary right now. Is my future self going to thank me for this choice, or am I going to regret this? If I skip this workout today, just like I've done for the last 3 days, and I stay in bed, am I going to regret that? Or is my future self come 2 p.m. going to be grateful that I didn't get a workout in this morning and I stayed in bed? And then just genuinely going through these 4 things, right? What does it feel like in your body? If you honor the boundary or if you break the boundary. What's the effect on your life and the people you care about if you honor the boundary or break the boundary, right? Is the decision you're about to make aligned with your highest self, or is the decision you're about to make aligned with that old version of you? And then finally, is your future self later today, right? Later this week, later this year, is that future version of yourself going to thank you for the choice that you're about to make, or are you going to regret it? And I think that when you run through this pretty quickly, BEAT, you can really protect the version of you that you're becoming. You can really stay in integrity with the things that you say are important to you. And you can make choices that are aligned and move you toward your highest self. And then when you've run this through, guys, it's actually so much easier to follow through on your boundaries because you see the impact that they have, right? You see that they're calling you forward. You see that your future self is going to thank you for this, and it's so worth it. So if you want to try this on in real life, pick a boundary. Like right now, just think of something that really matters to you. It can be something small, something preferably that's really doable, right? That feels clear. Like, man, I know I need to set a boundary around doing a weekly meal planning, or I need to set a boundary around my screen time before I go to bed, or I need to set a boundary around whatever is moving my body. And then we're not just going to set it when we're frustrated, right? Regulate. Go for a walk when you think about this boundary and how you're going to set it and how you're going to make sure that you can follow through on it. Do some breath work, shake it out, go dance for 90 seconds and shake your body. Whatever helps you regulate your nervous system and access your wisest self. And then set the boundary, right? Now, anticipate the pushback. We talked about that. Who might push against this the most, right? Is it your kids? Is it your partner? Is it your workspace? Is it like, who's going to probably have some push against this boundary, right? And then what stories might your brain start telling you when that happens? I think if you can anticipate it and expect it and prepare yourself for it, it makes it so much easier when it happens. And then choose your anchor. Maybe it's just a simple reminder. Maybe it's something from that BEAT framework. Like, all right, I'm doing this because it's aligned with how I want to show up, right? I'm setting this boundary because I know my future self is going to thank me for this choice. I'm setting this boundary because I know that making this decision and doing this thing is really going to have an impact on my family and the way in which I parent or how I show up in my marriage or how I show up at work. That's a big deal. It's an affirmation. It's a reminder. It's starting with your why. And it's so good because boundaries aren't supposed to be things that we're just, pushing through or dreading or like white knuckling. They're not really about that. They're about building this internal safety so we can stand strong with ourselves, even when that feels really uncomfortable. And that's it, guys. Boundaries just protect the best version of who you are. They keep you anchored in who you're becoming. All right. Thank you so much for listening today, you guys. Believing that you learned something about boundaries. I'm believing this BEAT framework when you're at a choice point for crossing a boundary is going to be really helpful for you. And then I want to hear how you're working on this in real life. What's the one boundary you've picked? Regulate before you set it, anticipate some pushback, choose an anchor, and then give it a shot, right? And see what happens. And as you stay consistent in it, it's going to get easier and it's going to pay off and you're going to reap the benefits of protecting your values and living in alignment with what you say is important to you. All right. I love you guys so much. Thanks for being with me today. I'll talk to y'all soon.